They say every heartbreak sounds different. Some break like glass, loud, shattering, impossible to ignore. Mine broke like silk, quiet, smooth, almost graceful in the way it tore me apart. When I saw my sister standing there, sunlight spilling through the church windows, I didn't understand what I was looking at. It took a few seconds, long enough for my brain to catch up to what my heart already knew. She was wearing my wedding dress, the same dress I'd folded carefully into a box 2 years earlier, the same dress I'd worn the day I said, forever, to the man she was standing beside now. My sister, Claire, and my ex-husband, Ethan. Hello, my dear listeners. I'm Auntie Grace. Welcome to True Heart Voices, where every story finds its healing. Thank you for being here. If you love true stories, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. It helps keep these voices alive. I always find it fascinating to read which cities and countries you're listening from, so don't hesitate to write a comment. Now, sit back for a moment and please get comfortable. Happy listening. Let's talk about what really happened. The air left my lungs like someone had reached inside and stolen it. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. All I could think was, this isn't happening. This can't be happening. But it was. And as everyone around them clapped and smiled, I realized the people we love most can sometimes rewrite our lives without asking for permission. If you had told me years ago that my life would come down to one stolen dress, I would have laughed. Back then, everything felt steady, predictable. I was 33, living in a small but cozy house just outside of Nashville, Tennessee, the kind of place where the mornings smelled like wet grass and coffee, and the neighbors waved from their porches. I was a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. My shifts were long, but the work made me feel useful. Like even after everything Ethan and I had been through, I could still help someone heal. Ethan and I had been separated for almost 2 years. Our marriage ended quietly. No screaming, no broken dishes, just a slow fade from I love you to I don't know anymore. When he left, he said he needed to find himself. I didn't know he'd find himself in the arms of someone I trusted more than anyone. After the divorce, I moved back closer to my family. Claire was the one who helped me get through those dark months. She'd come over after work with takeout and wine, sit cross-legged on my couch, and listen as I tried to make sense of what went wrong. Ethan wasn't your forever, Hannah, she'd said once, tapping my knee. He was just your lesson. She had this calm way about her. Gentle, patient, the opposite of me. I was emotional, restless, always trying to fix things that were already broken. So when she offered to store my wedding boxes in her attic, I didn't even hesitate. Until you're ready to let them go, she'd said. I smiled. You think that day will ever come? She'd grinned back. One day, maybe, when you're too busy being happy to care. Back then, I believed her. I believed every word. Claire and I grew up close, just 2 years apart. Our parents ran a small diner in town, the kind that still served homemade pie and hand-squeezed lemonade. We'd worked there as teenagers, wearing matching aprons and rolling our eyes at the same old regulars. She was always the golden one. Good grades, steady boyfriend, perfect hair. And I didn't mind because she made me feel safe, like no matter what, she'd be in my corner. When I got married, she stood by me as my maid of honor. She was the one who zipped that dress up my back, brushed away a stray hair, and whispered, "You look like someone's whole world." I didn't know then that she'd eventually become mine. After the divorce, my life settled into a rhythm. Work, coffee, the occasional dinner with Mom, and quiet evenings with my dog Daisy. Some days, I felt almost normal again. Then, out of nowhere, something small would remind me. A song Ethan used to hum, a place we'd gone together, a scent. Grief doesn't move in straight lines. It circles back, like a tide that won't stay out. But Claire kept me grounded. She'd call every few days, check in, ask if I needed anything. Sometimes, she'd stop by with Noah, her 6-year-old, whose laugh could melt the worst kind of day. If someone had asked me then who I trusted most in the world, I would have said her name without hesitation. It was a chilly Saturday morning in March, when everything started to shift. Claire called, her voice as sweet as ever. "Hey, can you watch Noah today? Mark and I have errands, and he's been asking for Aunt Hannah pancakes." "Of course," I said. "Bring him over." She dropped him off a few minutes later, kissed him on the forehead, and told me she'd be back before dinner. I remember noticing the way she was dressed. Jeans, boots, hair curled, makeup light but careful. She looked happy. When she left, I made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, and Noah covered them in syrup until they nearly drowned. Then he ran off to play with Daisy while I went upstairs to grab a blanket from the closet. That's when I saw it, the wedding box. It was sitting on the top shelf, pushed back, just where I'd left it, but the tape across the top was torn. I frowned, pulled it down, and opened it. Inside, the dress was there, but something felt off. The lace looked slightly crumpled, the hem faintly dusty, and near the neckline, a faint pink stain. Lipstick, not my shade. I ran my fingers over the fabric, confusion turning to unease. It smelled faintly of perfume, not mine, but something floral and expensive. When Claire came to pick up Noah that evening, I asked her, "Hey, did you open one of my boxes?" Her smile was quick, practiced. "What box?" "The one in your attic. My wedding stuff." She laughed softly. "No. Why? Did you misplace something?" "The tape was cut," she shrugged. "Maybe Mom was up there cleaning again. You know how she is about clutter." That was it. The conversation ended there. But her tone, it had this faint tremor to it, like she'd practiced the answer in her head. I told myself I was overthinking. After all, she was my sister, my safe place. There was no reason to doubt her. But that night, when I lay in bed, the image of that lipstick stain wouldn't leave me. A week later, she called again. "Hannah, could you watch Noah next weekend? Just for Saturday night. I'm going to a spa retreat with a few girlfriends." I smiled into the phone. "Good for you. You deserve it." "Thanks," she said. "I'll bring you some lavender lotion. You love that stuff." She sounded cheerful, relaxed, but something about the way she said goodbye lingered, like she was trying too hard to sound casual. Saturday came, and she dropped Noah off just before sunset. She was dressed beautifully. White sundress, delicate gold earrings, hair brushed smooth. For a spa retreat, it seemed oddly formal. Still, I didn't question it, because that's what blind trust looks like. It asks no questions, even when it should. The next morning, she called. "Hey," she said, voice soft and warm. "How's my boy? Still sleeping?" I said. "Did you have a good time?" "The best," she said. "Really peaceful." Something in her tone made my stomach twist. I didn't know it then, but that was the day she married him. When the truth came out, it wasn't from her. It came from a Facebook post. My cousin sent it to me with no message, just a link. It was a picture. Claire in white lace, Ethan beside her in a gray suit. They were smiling, standing beneath a floral arch. The caption read, "A love story reborn. Congratulations to Claire and Ethan." My phone slipped from my hand. The sound it made when it hit the floor didn't even register. All I could see was that dress, my dress, hugging her waist, like it had once hugged mine. I sat there for hours, scrolling through comments, likes, congratulations, people saying how meant to be they looked, how love always finds a way. No one knew the truth, that she hadn't just taken my ex, she'd taken my memories, my hope, my symbol of forever, and she'd turned it into her beginning. That day, something inside me changed. Not anger, not yet, just a hollow quiet that felt too deep to name. I didn't call her, I didn't text, because I knew that if I heard her voice, that soft, gentle tone, I might forgive her before I even understood why she'd done it. And that I couldn't allow. After that Facebook post, my world went strangely quiet. You'd think betrayal would sound like shouting, broken glass, slammed doors, crying until your throat burned, but it didn't. It sounded like silence. For a long time, I didn't even know what to feel. Anger seemed too big, sadness too small. It was something else, a mix of disbelief and shame, because I'd missed every sign. To understand what happened, you'd have to understand us, me, Claire, and Ethan, and how the cracks started long before that day. Claire and I were raised to share everything. Mom used to say, "You girls are my twin hearts. If one hurts, the other should feel it." And for most of our lives, that was true. We shared clothes, secrets, makeup, even crushes back in high school. But as we grew older, our paths split. I went to nursing school, chasing long shifts and a sense of purpose. Claire stayed in our hometown, working as a school counselor, the kind of person everyone trusted instantly. She was good at listening, at comforting. People would open up to her within minutes. I think that's what drew Ethan to her in the first place, even back when he was mine. Ethan and I met at a volunteer event, a blood drive, of all things. I was registering donors. He was cracking jokes in line to calm nervous people. He had that easy charm that felt like sunshine after a storm. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then he kept showing up at the hospital, at my favorite coffee shop, at the park, near my apartment. He said it was fate, and back then, I wanted to believe in something good. We married within a year. It wasn't perfect, but it felt safe, like I'd finally built something steady. Claire loved him. At least, that's what I thought. She'd come over for dinner, tease him about his cooking, laugh at his terrible dad jokes. He'd call her the sister I never had. They got along easily, too easily, maybe. But I didn't see danger in it, because trust, once given freely, blinds you to patterns that don't fit your idea of love. There were small moments, though, moments that made me pause. Like the time Ethan forgot our anniversary dinner because he'd been helping Claire move boxes. Or when I found a photo on his phone. Not scandalous, just Claire and him at a farmer's market, laughing. He said he'd sent it to me and must have saved it by accident. I believed him, because when you're in love, you build your own logic, a softer version of reality where nothing hurts if you don't let it. Then came the miscarriage. It was early, barely 6 weeks, but it felt like the world collapsed inward. Ethan grew distant after that. He said he needed space, time to think, time to breathe. Claire was the one who came over that night with soup and a blanket, who sat with me until I fell asleep. When I woke, she was gone, and so was Ethan. He didn't come home until morning. He said he'd gone for a drive to clear his head. I remember his words exactly. I didn't know how to help you, Hannah. You shut down. You stopped smiling. I wanted to scream that grief isn't a choice, that I was trying. But instead, I said, I'm sorry. I was always the one apologizing. After that, our marriage limped along. We tried counseling, weekend getaways, date nights, all the things couples are told to do when the love starts slipping through their fingers. But nothing worked. We weren't angry, just disconnected, like two people in the same room, but breathing different air. When he finally left, it wasn't with a fight. He just packed a bag one morning and said, you deserve someone who can give you more. I watched his car disappear down the street, and I remember thinking, maybe he's right. Maybe he's not the villain. Maybe we just ran out of us. What I didn't know was that my sister would pick up where I left off. After the divorce, my parents took his side quietly, not because they loved him more, but because they didn't want to lose the family connection. Small towns have a way of blurring lines. You can't escape history when everyone remembers your wedding vows. So, I turned to Claire, and she stepped into that role easily, calling, checking in, telling me I was strong. Sometimes, though, her comfort came with small barbs of comparison. You know, Ethan's been volunteering again, she'd say. I think he's trying to be better. Or, you should see how happy he looks lately. I think it's good he found peace. At first, I thought she meant it kindly, but eventually I realized she was watching him closely, too closely. The summer after the divorce, she threw a barbecue. Ethan was there. I remember standing in her backyard, a paper plate in my hand, pretending to laugh at someone's joke, while my eyes found them across the yard. She was wearing a floral sundress, yellow, the same one she'd worn at my bridal shower. He stood beside her, leaning in just a little too close. When she caught me looking, she smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. That's when the first thought crossed my mind, the one I tried to bury so deep it couldn't surface again. Maybe she likes him. But then she came over, wrapped her arm around me and said, you doing okay? And the thought vanished, because how could someone who loved me like that ever betray me? Time moved on. I started taking night shifts to stay busy. When I wasn't working, I was home watching old movies or going on long drives with Daisy. Claire, meanwhile, seemed happier than ever. She started dressing differently. Softer colors, more makeup, always polished. She said she was rediscovering herself. One night, she called me out of nowhere. Do you ever think about forgiving him? She asked. I was half asleep. Ethan? Yeah. I mean, not to get back together or anything. Just to let it go. I paused. Why? Because hate only hurts the person holding it, she said gently. You should be free by now. I remember thinking how mature that sounded, how wise. But later, lying awake, I wondered, why did she need me to forgive him so badly? There was another moment I can't forget. Mom had her birthday dinner at the diner we grew up in. The whole family came. Cousins, neighbors, everyone. And so did Ethan. Claire had invited him. She said she didn't want things to be awkward. But it was awkward, painfully so. He hugged me politely, like a stranger. And when I saw them whispering near the counter, something inside me tightened. They weren't touching. They didn't have to. There's a kind of intimacy that doesn't need contact. It's in the timing of laughter. The way two people look at each other, like they already share a secret. I saw that between them, and yet I said nothing, because the truth was too ugly to admit, and I wasn't ready to lose my sister again. In the months that followed, Claire started pulling away. Fewer calls, fewer visits. When I'd ask if everything was okay, she'd say she was busy with work, or tired. Once, she even said, you should start dating again, Hannah. You've been stuck in the past too long. It stung, not because she was wrong, but because her tone had changed. Less gentle, more dismissive, like she was slowly rewriting her version of me, from victim to burden. Then came the attic, the box, the lipstick stain, the first physical proof that something was deeply wrong. But even then, I wasn't ready to believe it, because when betrayal comes from strangers, you get angry. When it comes from your sister, you get lost. And that's how I stayed lost, until that Facebook post ripped away every illusion I had left. Even now, when I think about it, the memory feels unreal, like I'm watching someone else's life fall apart in slow motion. But it was mine, every word of it. And the worst part wasn't losing Ethan. It was realizing I never really knew Claire at all. It started small, the kind of thing you'd normally brush off. A glance that lingered too long, a pause in a sentence that didn't used to be there, little cracks that, alone, meant nothing, but together, they whispered something I didn't want to hear. The day I found the first clue, I wasn't looking for one. I was just trying to clean out the attic. It was one of those rare free Sundays. Rain tapping on the roof. Daisy curled up on an old quilt by the stairs. I'd been meaning to clear out the boxes since Ethan left. But every time I tried, I'd stop halfway. Because those boxes weren't just storage. They were a graveyard of a life I thought I had. That day, though, something felt different. Maybe it was the weather. Or maybe I was just tired of holding on to ghosts. So I started sorting. Wedding photos, cards, things I thought I'd already thrown away. And that's when I found it. A small white box tucked behind the Christmas ornaments. Inside were things that didn't belong to me. A set of keys, a folded receipt, and a lipstick tube. Not just any lipstick, Claire's shade. A soft rose pink she'd worn for years. I knew it instantly because she'd borrowed it from me the day of my engagement party and never gave it back. My first thought was simple. She must have left it here once. But then I looked closer. The receipt was from a motel about 40 minutes outside town. 2 rooms. Same last name, Cooper, Ethan's last name. My stomach dropped. For a long time, I just stared at it, trying to make sense of what my eyes were showing me. There must be a mistake. Someone else booked the room. It's just a coincidence. But my hands were trembling, and my throat felt dry, because deep down, I knew. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called her. "Hey," she said. Cheerful. Too cheerful. "What's up?" "Nothing much," I lied. "Just cleaning the attic." "You still using that rose pink lipstick?" She laughed. "No. Switched to coral ages ago." "Why?" "Oh, just found an old one up here. Thought it might be yours." There was a pause. A tiny pause. So brief anyone else would have missed it. Then she said, "Must be. You always had my stuff, remember?" Her tone was playful, but something in it cracked, like she was trying too hard to sound normal. After that call, I couldn't shake the unease. It followed me everywhere. To work, to the grocery store, to bed. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was her confessing something. Anything, but she didn't. She just kept pretending everything was fine. Sending memes, asking about Daisy, talking about new recipes she was trying. Normal. Too normal. That's when I started noticing other things. She began avoiding eye contact when we met. Her phone was always face down. And she mentioned Ethan more, casually, as if to test my reaction. "You know," she'd say, "Ethan's been thinking of adopting a dog. He asked if I knew what breeds were good for apartments." Or, "He came by the school last week to drop off supplies. He looked different." Different how? She never said, just smiled that same smile I'd learned to mistrust. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to her house. The porch light was on, but her car wasn't in the driveway. Still, I knocked. Once, twice, no answer. I started to turn back when I heard laughter inside. A man's laugh. Ethan's. I froze. For a second, I thought about walking away, pretending I didn't hear it. But something stronger pulled me forward. Not anger. Not even curiosity. It was need. I needed to know. So, I stepped closer to the window, careful, quiet. And there they were, sitting on the couch. A movie playing softly on the TV. Her head on his shoulder, his arm around her. They looked comfortable, like a couple who'd done this 100 times before. And in that moment, something inside me broke, not with rage, but with the kind of pain that's too deep for noise. I didn't confront them that night. I drove home in silence, parked in the driveway, and sat there until the sky turned gray. Because how do you confront your sister, your other half, when the evidence feels like a nightmare you can't wake up from? I didn't tell anyone. Not even Mom. I just started writing again. Every night after work, I'd pour it all into my journal. Every suspicion, every memory that didn't fit. Like the time Claire insisted Ethan needed closure. Or how she started wearing that rose pink lipstick again. The one she said she'd stopped using. I wrote down everything, trying to make sense of a story that kept changing. Weeks passed. Then one night, I got a message. It was from a woman I didn't recognize. Her name was Kelly. Someone from Ethan's work. She said, "I thought you should know. They've been seeing each other for a while. We didn't want you to find out this way." My hands went numb. I read it over and over like if I kept reading, it would change. But it didn't. It just stayed there. Cold. Factual. Final. I wanted to call Claire, to scream, to ask why. But I didn't. Because some truths don't need words. They echo in silence. The next time I saw her was at Mom's house. She acted normal, smiling like nothing had happened. I watched her talk about her new friend. A man she was taking things slow with. And Mom, bless her heart, believed every word. She even said, "I'm so happy for you, Claire. You deserve love again." I almost laughed because there she was, the sister who'd stolen my husband, being celebrated for moving on. When she hugged me goodbye, I felt her heartbeat against mine. And for the first time, I understood what it meant to love someone and hate them in the same breath. After that, I didn't see her for weeks. She stopped coming around. stopped calling. But one night, around midnight, she texted, "I hope you're okay. I miss you." I stared at that message for a long time. Then I typed back, "Do you?" She never replied. I tried to rebuild. Therapy, work, self-care, all of it. But the hurt was stubborn. Because betrayal like that doesn't fade. It rewires you. I started doubting everyone. Friends, coworkers, even strangers. Every laugh sounded like a secret. Every kind word felt rehearsed. Until, one afternoon, I found something that reignited everything. It was a message, hidden in my old phone's backup. An email Ethan had sent months before the divorce. Subject, for Claire. Body, "I can't keep doing this. She's starting to notice. We need to talk." My world tilted. Because suddenly, everything made sense. The late nights. The unexplained absences, the way she defended him. It had all started long before I ever knew. I closed my laptop and sat there in the dark, heart pounding, breath shaky, and for the first time, I wasn't just sad. I was angry, not at him, at her, because she'd watched me fall apart, knowing she was the reason. She'd held me while I cried over him and never said a word. That's when I decided if she wasn't going to tell the truth, I would find it myself. That decision, quiet, simple, made in the stillness of my living room, changed everything. Because once you start looking for the truth, you can't stop. And what I found next was worse than I ever imagined. If you're listening to this story, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. It helps keep these voices alive. Now, sit back for a moment, get comfortable, and let's talk about where we end. There's a certain kind of quiet that only comes before a storm. That still, heavy kind of silence when the world seems to hold its breath. That's what it felt like the night I decided to confront the truth. I didn't plan it. I didn't rehearse what I'd say. I just reached a breaking point. All it took was one photo. It was a Thursday evening. I remember because I'd just come home from work, still in my blazer, exhausted and half numb. I opened social media, something I hadn't done much lately, and there it was, a photo posted by a mutual friend from high school. "So happy for these two beautiful souls. Love wins in the end." At first, I couldn't even process what I was looking at. Claire in a wedding dress, Ethan in a suit. And not just any wedding dress, mine. The same one I'd packed away after the divorce, sealed in a box labeled "Memories, Do Not Touch." I stared at that screen so long, I forgot to breathe. The lace sleeves, the pearl buttons, even the tiny rip near the hem, the one from when I tripped walking down the aisle. It was my dress. My heart dropped into a kind of cold that words can't describe. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was theft, desecration. And yet, there they were, smiling, radiant, like they hadn't destroyed 2 lives to get there. I called her. She didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. So, I drove. Didn't even think about where. Just knew I needed to see her. Her car was in the driveway when I pulled up, lights on inside, music playing softly through the open window. I knocked once, then again. When she opened the door, she looked startled, like a child caught doing something she couldn't explain. "Hannah," she said, voice trembling. "What are you doing here?" I held up my phone. Her eyes flicked to the screen, the picture. She didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she whispered, "I was going to tell you." "When?" I asked, my voice cracking. "After the honeymoon? Or maybe after you wore my dress to his funeral someday?" She flinched. And for a long moment, we just stood there, 2 sisters, 1 doorway, a lifetime of love burning between us. "Come inside," she finally said. "Please." I stepped in. The air smelled like roses and champagne. There were still petals scattered on the coffee table, and a single slice of wedding cake on a plate, the same frosting I'd chosen years ago. I couldn't even look at her. "How could you?" "Claire?" I asked quietly. "Of all people, him?" Her eyes filled with tears. "It wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't plan it." "Then what? You just tripped and fell into my ex-husband's arms?" She winced. "Don't do that." "Do what? Hold you accountable?" Her voice rose, desperate, pleading. "You don't understand. I was there for him when you weren't. You shut him out, Hannah. You pushed him away. I was just trying to help." I laughed, hollow, sharp. "Help? You helped yourself to my life." She started crying. Real tears now. "I loved him. I didn't mean to, but I did. And when you two split, he came to me, broken. I thought it was over between you. I thought." "You thought wrong," I cut in. "You knew exactly what you were doing." She took a shaky breath. "I didn't steal him. He chose me." That line, those words, they hit harder than anything else she'd said. Because she was right. He did choose her. And somehow, that hurt even more than the betrayal itself. I sat down, my legs suddenly weak. "How long?" I asked. She hesitated. "Tell me the truth, Claire. She looked at the floor. A year, maybe more. A year. So even before the divorce, even while I was still fighting to save my marriage, she'd been standing in my kitchen, smiling, pretending to support me while texting him behind my back. I felt sick. She reached out, but I pulled away. Don't touch me. Tears streaked her cheeks. I didn't mean for you to find out this way. We wanted to tell you in person. Don't say we, I snapped. You don't get to be a team after what you did. She broke then, sobbing, covering her face. I know you hate me, she said through her hands. I hate myself too. I almost believed her. Almost. But then my eyes landed on something across the room. A wedding album, still open on the coffee table. Curiosity, or maybe self-destruction, made me pick it up. The first page was their wedding photo. Her smiling in my dress. Him holding her waist. The second page, them cutting the cake. The third, a note written beneath the picture in neat handwriting. For every new beginning that starts with an ending. His handwriting. And in the background of one photo, faint but visible, was Mom, smiling. My knees almost buckled. Mom was there? I whispered. She froze. That silence was my answer. You invited her, I said slowly. You made her part of this. She didn't want to, Hannah, Claire said quickly. But she thought it was better you didn't know until after. So she blessed it, I said. She stood there, watched you walk down the aisle in my dress, and said nothing. She started crying again. Please, don't hate her. She didn't mean— Stop, I said. Just stop. Because suddenly I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a web. Everyone tangled in it. Everyone complicit. I walked out, didn't take my coat, didn't look back. The night air hit me like a slap. Cold, sharp, real. I drove aimlessly. Tears blurring the road, ended up in front of the old church where Ethan and I had married, the same place she'd just married him. There were still remnants of their wedding, petals scattered on the steps, a ribbon fluttering in the wind. I picked up one of the petals and crushed it in my hand, because in that moment, I realized they hadn't just taken my husband or my dress. They'd taken my story. I didn't go home that night. I slept in my car outside the church. When the sun rose, everything looked the same, but I wasn't the same woman anymore. Something in me had shifted. A quiet, bitter acceptance. The kind that comes when you stop begging for apologies that will never come. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Dozens of missed calls, texts, even one from Mom. Please talk to me. We need to fix this. Fix? There's no fixing a wound like this. There's only learning to live around it. I didn't answer. Not her, not Claire, not anyone. Instead, I did something I hadn't done since the divorce. I opened the storage box labeled Memories. Inside were the remains of my old life, our vows, photos, a pressed flower from the bouquet, and tucked beneath them the tag from my wedding dress. I held it, trembling, because somehow, even after everything, I couldn't bring myself to hate her completely. Maybe because she was still my sister, or maybe because some part of me still believed people can change, even the ones who hurt you most. But that forgiveness wouldn't come easy, and as I'd soon learn, the public wouldn't forgive her either, because the truth, the full truth, was about to go viral. And this time, I wouldn't be the one left broken. They say revenge isn't sweet, it's just sad satisfaction. I used to believe that, but when your sister marries your ex-husband in your wedding dress, you learn that satisfaction is the only thing that helps you sleep at night. For days, I disappeared, didn't answer texts, didn't return calls. Even my boss told me to take some time, so I did. I stayed in a small Airbnb 2 towns over, near the lake. It was quiet, just the sound of crickets and water lapping against the dock. I needed silence, not the kind that comes from peace, but the kind that lets you think. Because I had a choice to make. I could keep being the woman people walked over, the too nice one, the one who never fought back. Or I could finally stop bleeding for people who never once bandaged my wounds. The night it happened, I couldn't stop replaying that photo in my head. Her face, his hand on her waist, the caption, the comments, dozens of mutual friends congratulating them like it was some fairy tale. But no one knew the story behind it. No one knew what they'd done, until I realized maybe it was time they did. I started small, gathered screenshots, texts, photos, even the receipt from the bridal shop where she'd picked up my dress for cleaning. Everything I could find that proved what they'd hidden. Then I wrote, not a rant, not a sob story, just the truth. I never thought I'd see the day my sister married my ex-husband in my wedding dress. But here we are. I hit post, public, and went for a walk. By the time I came back, the post had hundreds of likes, dozens of comments. By morning, it had thousands. People were tagging friends, debating, arguing. Half were furious on my behalf. The other half, well, they didn't believe it could be real, until someone found their wedding photos, the same ones I'd seen, and shared them in the comments. The internet did the rest. It spread like wildfire. By the weekend, my sister's perfect little fairy tale had turned into a scandal. Bride wears sister's dress to marry her ex. It was on gossip blogs, reaction videos, even a morning radio show. She called me that Sunday, sobbing. "How could you do this to me?" I let her words hang in the air before saying, "I didn't do this, Claire. You did. I just stopped covering for you." She cried harder. "People are sending hate messages. Ethan might lose his job." I almost laughed. "You should have thought of that before you used my memories as props for your wedding photos." Then I hung up. It wasn't triumph I felt afterward. Not joy, just quiet justice. The kind that doesn't need applause. For once, the truth was louder than their lies, but life has a way of complicating even justice. Mom showed up at my door that night, hair messy, eyes swollen from crying. She looked older than I'd ever seen her. "Hannah, this has to stop," she said, stepping inside before I could stop her. "You've made your point." "My point?" I said bitterly. "Mom, they humiliated me. They lied to you, to everyone." "I know," she said softly, "but the internet doesn't forgive. This isn't just about them now. It's about our whole family. People are digging into your past, our home, everything." I stared at her. "So now I'm the problem?" Her eyes filled with tears. "No, but revenge won't bring peace. Please, honey, don't let this consume you." I wanted to yell, to throw her out, to remind her she'd attended their wedding, but something in her voice, that tired, trembling guilt, made me stop. She wasn't defending them. She was scared. Scared of what happens when secrets stop being secrets. After she left, I sat by the window for hours, watching the lake shimmer under the moonlight, and for the first time since it all began, I didn't feel anger. I felt empty, because once the anger fades, you're left with the truth. You can destroy someone publicly, but it won't fix what's broken inside you. A few days later, I got a call from Ethan. I didn't expect that. I almost didn't answer, but something in me, maybe morbid curiosity, made me pick up. "Hannah," he said, his voice low, tired. "We need to talk." I stayed silent. "You ruined our lives," he continued. "Claire's not eating, not sleeping. She's scared to leave the house. She should have thought of that before she stole mine," I said coldly. He exhaled. "You don't understand. She's pregnant." My heart stuttered. Pregnant? It was like the air left the room. Pregnant with his child. The same man who'd once told me he wasn't ready for kids. "Congratulations," I said quietly. "Looks like she got everything she wanted." He hesitated. "That's not fair. You and we were over long before her." "No," I said. "We were over the moment you made me feel like I wasn't enough." He tried again. "Hannah, please. I know you're angry, but—" "I'm not angry," I interrupted. "I'm done." Then I hung up. That night, I cried again. Not because I wanted him back, but because I finally accepted he never belonged to me in the first place. Some stories aren't stolen. They just end earlier than we wish they did. In the weeks that followed, things got quieter. The online storm calmed. People moved on, as they always do. Claire deleted her accounts. Ethan stopped posting. And me? I went back to work, started therapy, took long walks by the lake. I even started writing again. Not posts, but journal entries about love, loss, and the strange way pain teaches us to see clearly. Because maybe that's what all this was, a brutal kind of clarity. Then, one morning, I got a letter. No return address, just my name, written in familiar handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "I'm sorry. I know I can't undo it. I just hope one day you'll remember I'm still your sister. Love, Claire." There was something else inside the envelope, a small square of fabric, lace, from my wedding dress. She'd kept a piece, and for reasons I can't quite explain, that tiny scrap of lace made me cry harder than anything else had. Because in that moment, I realized something I hadn't before. I didn't need revenge anymore. She'd already punished herself far more than I ever could. That evening, I drove to the lake again, the same dock where I'd spent those nights alone. I took that piece of lace, tied it around a small stone, and dropped it into the water. It sank slowly, like the last trace of something I no longer needed to carry. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. By Monday morning, it felt like the whole town had turned its head toward me. I wasn't looking for validation. I didn't want pity, but it was impossible not to notice the whispers, the sideways glances, the sudden quiet when I walked into a room. At the coffee shop, the barista hesitated when I ordered my latte, leaning slightly closer. Is that really your sister in the wedding photos?" she asked. I nodded slowly. Yes, and yes, it was my dress. She swallowed, her eyes wide. I'm so sorry." I smiled faintly, almost reflexively, the same small, sad smile I'd worn for years. "It's okay. She's family." The word family hung in the air, fragile, like thin glass. By noon, Texts were pouring in. Old friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Cousins I barely remembered. Neighbors I didn't know could text at all. Some were supportive. Most were shocked. Some were angry at Claire and Ethan. But a few, fewer than I expected, blamed me for making it public. The anger confused me at first. Why would they blame the person who'd been stolen from? But then I realized they were seeing the story through their own lens, not mine. And that was fine. I didn't need everyone to understand. I only needed myself. That evening, my phone rang. It was my mother. Hannah, people are talking. The church, the neighbors, everyone. And your father? He's furious. I closed my eyes. Mom, I told you I didn't post this for drama. I posted it because it was true. That's it. But the family, it's torn apart. I never imagined it would go public like this, she said, voice trembling. I stayed silent, listening. I know you're hurt, and I know they hurt you, but we have to think about the family, Hannah. Please, can we find a way to... No, I interrupted. Mom, there's no way to undo this. And honestly, there shouldn't be. Not anymore. I'm not hiding my life for anyone who can't respect it, she sighed. I just worry. Mom, I know. I love you, but I'm done worrying about them. Done covering for them. Done pretending it never happened. By midweek, the town's social channels were buzzing. Local news picked up the story. Bride wears sister's dress to marry her ex. Family drama unfolds online. Comments flooded in. Outrage, disbelief, empathy. People I didn't know sent me private messages, thanking me for speaking my truth. I thought I was the only one this happened to, one woman wrote. Your courage gives me hope, another said. I realized something then. The impact wasn't just personal, it was collective. Other women, other families, could finally see that these betrayals, the hidden, suffocating ones, were real. And maybe they could reclaim their own power too. At work, it was harder. I managed a small marketing firm. Clients whispered in the hallways. Some staff avoided eye contact. Even the receptionist, usually chatty, barely smiled. I kept my focus on the office, kept doing my job, kept my head down. But one afternoon, my assistant, Mia, came into my office, holding a folder. Hannah, someone delivered this to the front desk, she said. It's addressed to you personally. Inside was a stack of letters and printed messages. Some were encouraging, some vicious, some threatened legal action. I didn't read them all. I didn't need to. I just held the folder against my chest and exhaled. I'm okay, I said. And I was, or at least I forced myself to be. Then came the family confrontation. Claire showed up at my door, uninvited. Her hair was pulled back tightly, her face pale. I didn't answer immediately. She knocked again, harder. Finally, I opened the door. Claire, I said calmly, what do you want? I wanted to explain, she said, voice shaking. You used my wedding dress to marry my ex, I replied. There's nothing left to explain, she flinched, as if my words struck her physically. I didn't mean to hurt you like this. I wanted him, Hannah. And I panicked. I stared at her. Panicked. You stole from me, from our family, from yourself. Her eyes filled with tears. I know I was wrong. But people are calling me a villain. Everyone hates me. I can't take it anymore. I sighed, the anger inside me softening slightly. Claire, this isn't about you anymore. It's about me. I'm reclaiming my life. If you want to stay in it, you'll have to earn it. Not through lies, not through stealing, and certainly not through hiding behind my pain. She nodded, sobbing. It was the first real acknowledgement I'd heard. Not excuses, not justifications, just the truth. In the days that followed, the story spread beyond the small town. Family friends called. Neighbors whispered in the streets. Even strangers stopped me at the grocery store. Some people offered unsolicited advice. Some wanted me to forgive immediately. Some wanted me to humiliate Claire further. But I knew better. Justice didn't need to be performed publicly. It had already happened. The truth was out, and the only thing left was how I would live after it. Then came the surprise. A former co-worker of Ethan's, someone I barely knew, contacted me. Hannah, you should know, Ethan's getting fired, she said. Apparently, his behavior, the secret marriage, the public scandal, had violated workplace policies. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't want to. I simply felt relief. Finally, the people who had caused me the most pain were facing real-world consequences. Not my doing. Just natural fallout. Mom visited again a week later. Hannah, she said softly, I know this hasn't been easy, but you handled it better than I thought you would. You didn't lash out. You didn't ruin your life. I smiled faintly. I learned a long time ago that letting anger drive your actions only leaves you exhausted. I wanted truth, and I got it. That's enough. She nodded, wiping her eyes. You're growing into such a strong woman. I'm proud of you. For the first time in months, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel broken. I felt seen. By the end of the month, Life had shifted. Claire had moved out of town. Ethan was no longer part of my life in any meaningful way. And me? I'd begun to reclaim the small joys I had ignored for far too long. Walking my dog in the park, cooking meals I actually enjoyed, laughing at silly things on TV without guilt. And when I drove past the bridal shop where my dress had been, I didn't feel rage or envy. I felt something quieter, stronger, closure. Not everything was perfect. Not all wounds healed overnight. But the truth had been told. The consequences had arrived. And in that, I found my balance again. The public consequence had been messy. It had been uncomfortable, but it had been necessary because sometimes the world has to see what you endured before you can fully move on. And sometimes the people who hurt you most, even family, have to face the mirror of their own actions. And finally, I could begin to rebuild my life. The first Saturday morning after Claire had left town, I woke up before the sun. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been for months. Not the eerie quiet of anticipation, nor the tense quiet of lingering questions. This was calm, gentle, almost fragile calm. I made my way to the kitchen, barefoot on the cool wooden floor, and brewed my coffee. The aroma filled the air, rich and grounding. I took the first sip slowly, savoring it, letting it root me back into the moment. It was my moment, not anyone else's. I walked to the living room window and looked out at the street. Children were riding bikes, their laughter punctuating the crisp air. A neighbor waved, and I waved back, smiling for real this time. Not the polite, cautious smile I'd worn in public, but the one that rises from the core. The one that says, I am okay, I am me. Over the next week, I began to reclaim pieces of myself I'd lost in the chaos of betrayal. I started with small things, cooking meals I genuinely enjoyed, picking up books I'd abandoned, even playing music in the house, loud, unapologetic music, without worrying about anyone else's comfort. One evening, I found myself in the attic where I had stored my wedding dress before Claire took it. The dress was gone, vanished, as if it had never existed. For a moment, I expected a pang of pain, a surge of anger, maybe even tears. But all I felt was peace. I realized then that the dress had never truly defined me. It hadn't held my identity or my worth. I had carried that weight myself, silently, privately, until I decided it no longer belonged to me. Friends began to visit again, not the old acquaintances who whispered or judged, but the ones who had stayed at arm's length, waiting for me to emerge from the storm. Mia, my assistant, stopped by one afternoon with a casserole and a bottle of wine. You're glowing, she said. I laughed softly. I think I'm just finally breathing again. She nodded, understanding. It's been a long road, and you handled it with grace. Grace? I said, raising an eyebrow. Maybe, or maybe just stubborn survival. She smiled. Either way, it's inspiring. I also started reconnecting with my mother and father. Mom had been a quiet pillar throughout everything. I realized that, despite her own fears and anxieties, she never once told me to forgive blindly or to pretend everything was fine. She let me process, let me rage, let me grieve, and that, I realized, was the truest form of support. Dad had taken longer. He was angry, distant, protective, sometimes to the point of suffocating. But over dinner one night, he finally said, Hannah, I see you, and I'm proud. You didn't let them break you. I felt a lump rise in my throat, not from anger, not from frustration, but from relief, from recognition, from being fully seen. Work became a source of renewal rather than stress. I allowed myself to set new boundaries. I spoke more openly with my staff about honesty, respect, and integrity, not in a preachy way, but in the way someone tells the truth because they've lived the consequences. Projects flowed more smoothly. Clients respected the renewed confidence I brought into the office. I no longer felt like I was performing a role, pretending to be someone strong while crumbling inside. I was strong, not because the world told me I was, but because I had chosen it every single day. Then came the quiet moments, the most powerful of all, sitting alone on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, walking through the park in the late afternoon, feeling the crunch of leaves beneath my boots. Even mundane tasks like folding laundry or washing dishes became meditative, reminders that life continued and that I was still here, intact, whole. One evening, I took a long look in the mirror. The reflection staring back at me wasn't perfect. My eyes carried the shadows of betrayal. My shoulders bore traces of the weight I'd carried. My hands had known the ache of grief and anger, but my reflection also carried something new, strength, quiet certainty. and a kind of warmth I hadn't recognized in myself before. I smiled at her, really smiled, and for the first time in months, it felt genuine. Healing, I discovered, didn't happen all at once. It was in the little victories, in setting boundaries with family, in saying no without guilt, in reclaiming laughter, joy, and even love, not dependent on anyone else's approval or presence. I began to journal again, writing long letters to myself that I never sent. Letters filled with truths I had withheld, anger I had swallowed, and the lessons I had learned. One of my entries read, "I will never allow someone else to dictate my value. I am worthy of honesty, respect, and care. Betrayal does not define me, only my response does." Reading it aloud, I felt a deep sense of release. Months passed. The story faded from social media and local gossip, but the lessons remained. Claire's absence was a quiet reminder that some people only have roles in our lives for a season. Ethan's removal from my life reminded me that toxic attachments cannot coexist with growth. And my family, slowly mending and realigning, reminded me that love can endure when honesty and courage guide it. Then, one spring afternoon, I received a letter. It wasn't from Claire. It wasn't from Ethan. It was from a stranger, a woman I had never met, who had seen my story online. She wrote, "I thought I was alone. I thought betrayal like this was something I had to bear in silence. But reading your story, your strength gave me courage. Thank you." I held the letter close, tears streaming down my face. In that moment, I realized something profound. The journey of healing isn't just personal. It ripples outward. It affects those who witness it, even those you'll never meet. I started small acts of service, mentoring younger women at work, volunteering with local support groups, sharing my story quietly in spaces where honesty was needed and judgment wasn't welcome. Through giving, I healed further. Through being seen, I grew stronger. Through forgiving, not for anyone else, but for myself, I finally felt free. And then came the first real day of joy. I walked into my home one evening, the kitchen smelling faintly of fresh bread. I poured myself a cup of tea. I sat by the window and watched the sunset. The light hit my face just so, and I realized I was no longer carrying the weight of what Claire and Ethan had done. I had reclaimed my story, my dignity, my life, and for the first time in a long while, I felt whole. Life wasn't perfect. It never is. There were moments of doubt, of fear, of remembering what had been taken, but each time I reminded myself I had survived. I had chosen integrity over revenge. I had embraced honesty over silence, and in doing so, I had built a life I could finally be proud of. Healing, I learned, isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing what you carry forward, choosing the moments, the lessons, the love, and letting the rest go. And I chose wisely. I chose me. Sitting in the quiet of my home that evening, I thought about how strange life can be, how betrayal, pain, and loss can arrive like uninvited guests, but also how choice, our choice, can turn even the harshest moments into something meaningful. I looked around my living room. The soft glow of the lamp highlighted the worn edges of furniture, the familiar clutter of books and cups and memories. Everything bore the marks of ordinary life, the kind of ordinary that feels sacred after chaos. I realized then that healing isn't loud. It doesn't require fanfare or social media posts or declarations to the world. It begins in small, private moments, in a deep breath taken when you've wanted to scream, in a quiet night spent thinking of tomorrow rather than yesterday, in the steady rhythm of daily life that reminds you over and over that you are still here. I thought about my sister, Claire, about Ethan, about the choices they made and the consequences they carried, even if they never fully realized it. I thought about myself, the Hannah who had felt shattered, humiliated, and unseen, and the Hannah who now sat calmly in the warmth of her own home, finally able to smile without fear or anger. I wanted to tell my audience, the women, the daughters, the mothers, the people who might be sitting alone with their own stories of betrayal, something simple but powerful. You are not defined by what others take from you. You are defined by what you choose to hold on to, by the life you decide to build afterward. When I first discovered what Claire had done, I thought the world had ended. I thought that no one could understand that mixture of heartbreak, fury, and disbelief. But I learned that life doesn't stop when someone betrays you. Life keeps moving, and with each step you take, even a hesitant, trembling one, you move closer to freedom, closer to peace. And freedom, I realized, is the most potent form of revenge. Not revenge against others, but the revenge against pain itself. The refusal to let it dictate the rest of your life. I want you to think about the moments you have carried silently, the moments you thought would break you, or that someone else could define for you. Imagine for a moment releasing them, not forgetting, not pretending they didn't matter, but letting them rest where they belong, in the past. Because life is far too precious to spend trapped in anger, resentment, or regret. Life is for reclaiming, rebuilding, and rising again. The light hit my face just so, and I realized I was no longer carrying the weight of what Claire and Ethan had done. I had reclaimed my story, my dignity, my life. And for the first time in a long while, I felt whole. Life wasn't perfect. It never is. There were moments of doubt, of fear, of remembering what had been taken. But each time I reminded myself I had survived. I had chosen integrity over revenge. I had embraced honesty over silence. And in doing so, I had built a life I could finally be proud of. Healing, I learned, isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing what you carry forward, choosing the moments, the lessons, the love, and letting the rest go. And I chose wisely. I chose me. Sitting in the quiet of my home that evening, I thought about how strange life can be, how betrayal, pain, and loss can arrive like uninvited guests, but also how choice, our choice, can turn even the harshest moments into something meaningful. I looked around my living room. The soft glow of the lamp highlighted the worn edges of furniture, the familiar clutter of books and cups and memories. Everything bore the marks of ordinary life, the kind of ordinary that feels sacred after chaos. I realized then that healing isn't loud. It doesn't require fanfare or social media posts or declarations to the world. It begins in small, private moments, in a deep breath taken when you've wanted to scream, in a quiet night spent thinking of tomorrow rather than yesterday, in the steady rhythm of daily life that reminds you over and over that you are still here. I thought about my sister, Claire, about Ethan, about the choices they made and the consequences they carried, even if they never fully realized it. I thought about myself, the Hannah who had felt shattered, humiliated, and unseen, and the Hannah who now sat calmly in the warmth of her own home, finally able to smile without fear or anger. I wanted to tell my audience, the women, the daughters, the mothers, the people who might be sitting alone with their own stories of betrayal, something simple but powerful. You are not defined by what others take from you. You are defined by what you choose to hold on to, by the life you decide to build afterward. When I first discovered what Claire had done, I thought the world had ended. I thought that no one could understand that mixture of heartbreak, fury, and disbelief. But I learned that life doesn't stop when someone betrays you. Life keeps moving, and with each step you take, even a hesitant, trembling one, you move closer to freedom, closer to peace. And freedom, I realize, is the most potent form of revenge. Not revenge against others, but the revenge against pain itself, the refusal to let it dictate the rest of your life. I want you to think about the moments you have carried silently, the moments you thought would break you, or that someone else could define for you. Imagine for a moment releasing them, not forgetting, not pretending they didn't matter, but letting them rest where they belong, in the past, because life is far too precious to spend trapped in anger, resentment, or regret. Life is for reclaiming, rebuilding, and rising again. And so, as I sit here tonight with the house finally quiet and the memories softened by the gentle light of reflection, I offer this to you. The story you've just heard is not just mine. It is the story of anyone who has been betrayed, left behind, or underestimated. It is the story of anyone who has felt powerless, only to discover that their power was waiting for them all along. It is a reminder that even in the darkest chapters, we can write new endings, that even after heartbreak, we can feel whole again. That forgiveness, whether given to others or reserved for ourselves, is the key to stepping fully into the life we deserve. So, I ask you now, what would you do if you could reclaim the part of your story that was taken? What would you forgive? What would you protect? And how would you rise? Take a moment, breathe, and think about it. And if you carry your own story of betrayal or heartbreak, know this: you are not alone. Your courage is already within you. Your voice deserves to be heard. Your life deserves to be lived fully, boldly, and honestly. Thank you for allowing me to share my story with you. I hope it reminds you that no matter the betrayal, no matter the loss, your story is still yours, and your next chapter is waiting, bright and unbroken. If my story resonated with you, please share it. Tell someone you love, because when we share our truths, we remind each other of something essential. That strength is born not from perfection, but from surviving and rising again. And always remember, your life, your choices, your resilience, those are the things that no one can ever take from you. Sometimes life takes from us, but sometimes it teaches us too. If this story touched you today, if it reminded you of something you've lived through, please don't keep it inside. Tell me your story. Thank you in advance for sharing this moment with me. I wonder which part of this story stayed with you. Which moment did you feel deep in your chest? And where are you listening from? Tell me in the comments. I personally read every single comment myself, because your words might be the light someone else needs tonight. And if you haven't yet, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because here at True Heart Voices, every story deserves to be heard and every heart deserves to heal. Did you like my story? If you listened all the way to the end, drop a number 1 in the comments. If you enjoyed it, you can support me by liking the video and sending a small tip. I've got many more life stories just like this on my channel, so make sure to subscribe and check them out. I've added 2 new stories on screen that everyone loves. Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next one with love.